First, we found that there are human rights flashpoints around the world ready to ignite whole regions and on which action is not coming. And secondly, we found people's demand for action is growing.
The people's demand has been growing for the past 60 years now. Have you seen any improvement?
Well, we have seen some improvement, for example, on the abolition of the death penalty, but the improvements are nowhere near what is needed, and that's why we are calling on governments to recommit themselves to correct 6 decades of human rights failures.
Human rights abuses, human rights violations, the call to end human rights violations has been growing. Not only just calls against the government of the United States and China and Russia. Do you think that at times that it's falling on deaf ears?
Well, we think that there is a burning imperative now. Human rights flashpoints that could engulf entire regions. If you look at Zimbabwe, Myanmar, Darfur, the Middle East. So these are political security problems as well as major human rights crises.
How much of a steep battle is it?
It is tough to get governments to listen, but I think well, because they have other priorities on their agenda, but what they don't realize is that these human rights priorities are sweeping other issues off the agenda. When Myanmar gets into the situation where it is now, they have to take action. So we are calling for the world leaders to set a role model and to create an alliance with the UN to push these issues forward.
Which countries do you think need to take a lead in this?
The US, the European Union, Russia, China, but we are also calling on what we are calling the emerging powers, India, Brazil, Mexico, to show much greater concern for human rights on the international agenda.
That's the thing, isn't it? The irony is, while a lot of people around the world, a lot of countries around the world are saying, okay, you accuse us of human rights violations, but look at the developed countries such as in the European Union and in the United States where there are real human rights violations there. What incentive is there for them to say, well, okay, we're going to start doing our best, but you got to talk to the United States?
Well, there's a crisis of moral authority, and that's why we're calling on the US, the EU, Russia, China to take the lead on restoring their moral authority again as leaders, and that means correcting their own abuses, closing Guantanamo, setting their own record straight.
How do you make human rights a major priority?
Well, I think it's people power. People were on the streets last year. We saw demonstrations in Pakistan, black-suited lawyers. We saw saffron-robed monks in Burma. We saw women activists in Iran. Right now we see people protesting the food crisis. There's a growing demand on the side of people for change and a burning imperative, a political imperative on the other side to do something about these major problems like Zimbabwe and Myanmar. That together, we feel, is coming to a head this year, and governments have to respond.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Myanmar and, of course, what's happening right now, the extension of detention of Aung San Suu Kyi, the lack of real push for foreign aid workers to get into the country. I should say not the lack of push, but the lack of the allowance of the military junta to go in. How that's happening right now. This is not happening 60 years ago. It's happening right now.
It's happening right now, but what we see is very interesting, the way in which ASEAN, the UN, and the international community are coming together, and that's the kind of alliance, new alliance, strong alliance that has to emerge, but they need to recognize that there are deep political problems that underlie the humanitarian crisis in Myanmar now.